The Chicago rain fell like silver bullets, tearing through the night across the neon-lit streets of Michigan Avenue. K.L. Voss stepped out of a battered yellow taxi, his tall frame gaunt after 5 years of a wrongful prison sentence. His grey-blue eyes scanning the darkness like a predator's blade. 5 years ago, he was a top CIA agent, deep undercover in a Mexican cartel. But now, freedom was just a fragile shell covering his gut-wrenching pain. His wife, Elara, and his young son, Finn, they were dead. Not an accident, but a bloody massacre orchestrated by Dante Reyes, the cartel boss from Mexico City, to silence him about a cross-border arms trafficking ring. K.L. tightened his grip on the black backpack and walked into the old apartment building in the Loop, where what was once his home was now just a pile of ashes. The musty air, mixed with the smell of rust from a broken water pipe, hit his nose. Apartment number 512. 5th floor. The door was wide open. An invitation from death itself. K.L. stood silently amidst the wreckage, overturned tables and chairs, shattered glass sparkling under the streetlight that filtered through the broken window. Memories came rushing back like the Grim Reaper's scythe Elara, curled up in a pool of dark red blood on the kitchen floor, her warm brown eyes now lifeless, her hand still clutching the picture Finn had drawn the day before. The 6-year-old boy, with his wide grin and messy blonde hair, lay beside his mother, his throat slit as clean as a razor. The papers called it a common home invasion, but K.L. knew better. It was a message from Reyes: shut up or die. They wanted to erase him, because he had come close to destroying their gun-running network from Mexico into the heart of Chicago, where cartel weapons became tools for street gangs. K.L. didn't hesitate. He locked the main door with a heavy iron chain, drew the pitch-black curtains over the windows, turning the apartment into a dark tomb. From his backpack, he pulled out gifts from old prison buddies: a razor-sharp dagger with a serrated edge, a steel wire as thin as a spider's silk but tougher than steel, and a disassembled Beretta 92 FS, a familiar weapon from his CIA training years in the Nevada desert. 5 years behind bars had forged him into a killing machine, muscles taut under scarred skin, reflexes as fast as lightning, and a heart that was now just a block of ice. He was once the CIA's ghost, specializing in silent cartel assassinations on the border. But now, his only target was Reyes, the bastard who had stolen his last ray of light. K.L. moved as silently as the night, stringing the steel wire across the main entrance, its end attached to a razor-sharp blade ready to sever an intruder's throat. Under the kitchen floor, he planted a homemade smoke grenade made from chemicals bought on Chicago's black market. A single pull cord would unleash toxic smoke. The small mezzanine, where Finn used to play with Legos, was now a sniper's nest with an AR-15 hidden behind an old wardrobe, its infrared scope scanning the darkness. Every corner of the house was a kill zone, a cable rigged to drop an iron weight from the ceiling, a homemade pressure plate mine in the hallway packed with sharp metal fragments. K.L. did one last check, beads of sweat on his forehead under his worn leather jacket, his breath as steady as a warrior's heartbeat. He knew they would come. Reyes's lackeys always kept an eye on old enemies. And tonight, the scent of fresh blood was in the air. Outside, the rain continued to patter on the muddy pavement. K.L. sat motionless by a crack in the curtains, watching through the steam-fogged glass. A sleek black SUV stopped 100 meters from the building, its headlights cutting out like a demon's eyes. 2 men got out, dressed in tight black clothes, moving stealthily under an umbrella, handguns glinting in their jacket pockets. They were the recon team. K.L. recognized it immediately from the way they scanned their surroundings, the professional gestures of cartel mercenaries. He smiled coldly, his hand tightening around the dagger's hilt, the cold steel touching his skin. "Sooner than I thought," he muttered, his voice as deep as distant thunder, without waiting for them to approach. Kale slipped out the back door, blending into the downpour. He moved like a phantom, his feet silent on the wet pavement, a skill from his CIA training years in the jungles of the Mexican border where he had once crawled through gunfire to survive. The two men were nearing the rusty iron fence, one of them using binoculars to scan the apartment window. Kale circled around behind them, his heart beating steadily, his breath controlled. The first one, a fat guy with a snake tattoo on his neck, didn't even have time to turn before Kale's low taekwondo kick slammed into his knee. Bone crunched, and he collapsed, his mouth open to scream. Kale lungered, applying a jiu-jitsu chokehold from behind and snapping his neck with a sharp twist. A dry crack echoed. The body slumped into a puddle, blood spreading in the yellow glow of the streetlight. The second man spun around, his eyes wide with horror, pulling a handgun from his belt. But Kale was faster. He darted through the rain, delivering a Muay Thai punch straight to the man's jaw. The blow landed like a sledgehammer, dislocating it and sending broken teeth flying. The man staggered, his gun firing a wild shot into the air with a deafening bang. Kale gave him no chance. Landing a roundhouse kick to his temple, the man's head snapped back. His eyes rolled white, and he collapsed into the mud. Kale checked for a weak pulse, then dragged the bodies into the roadside bushes, the rain quickly washing the blood away. From the second man's phone, he read a short message. Target confirmed in the loop. Tell Reyes, we move tonight. Kale crushed the device under his heel and headed back to the apartment, his heart pounding not with fear but with a blazing fire of hatred. He sat down on the cold wooden floor, holding a worn, old photograph of Elara and Finn smiling brightly by Lake Michigan in the summer. Kale's eyes were bloodshot as memories of that fateful night flooded back 5 years ago. In this very apartment, they were attacked while he was on a mission in Mexico. Reyes wanted him erased to cover up the smuggling of AKs and grenades into a weapons cache hidden beneath Chicago. Kale had survived prison, but he had lost everything. Now, he would make Reyes pay in blood. A strange noise came from the street below, a motorcycle revving, a dark shadow speeding past. Kale got to his feet, checked his Beretta, and chambered around with a metallic click. The apartment was ready, and so was he. But would there be more of them than he anticipated? Or was this just the prelude to a nightmare from Mexico? Which area are you listening to this story from? And what time is it where you are right now? Leave a comment below so I know you are still healthy and fully focused on this story. My dear friend, we will continue right after this. A strange noise from the Chicago street below startled Kale Voss, his hand tightening around the cold Beretta. He glided to the window, squinting through the relentless downpour that still lashed the neon-red streets of the Loop. The black SUV was long gone, but Kale knew they were just testing the waters. Dante Reyes's men never acted on a whim. He returned to the cold floor, picked up the photo of Elara and Finn, and tucked it deep into the breast pocket of his jacket, close to his skin. The pain was like a knife twisting in his heart. But this was no time for weakness. The memory of that fateful night came back with stark clarity. The apartment plunged into thick darkness, the sound of shattering glass like thunder, Elara's scream echoing, "Finn, run!" and the thick, metallic smell of blood that hit him when he returned from his mission. Reyes had given the order, all because Kale had come too close to exposing the rifle smuggling operation from Mexico into an underground armory beneath Chicago. Now, he needed information, and the South Side had dark corners where truth was traded for blood and fists. Kale left the apartment through the back exit, melting into the crowd of drenched people under the cold drizzle. He pulled a baseball cap low, hiding half of his scarred, angular face, his worn leather jacket concealing his powerful frame. The Black Viper bar was deep in the South Side, a den for smugglers and cartel foot soldiers, where the booming hip-hop music drowned out the sound of gunshots. A flickering green neon sign hung over the rusty iron door, and the stench of cheap cigarettes and stale beer wafted out like a warning. Kael pushed the door open. The heavy air pressed down on his chest. Tattooed black men sat around poker tables, their gazes as watchful as hungry wolves. He walked straight to the rotting wooden bar, ordered a double whiskey, and scanned the room like a radar. His target, Victor Kane, a loyal henchman of Reyes, a fat slob with a V-shaped scar on his forehead, who frequented this place to collect protection money from local gangs. Victor sat in the darkest corner, his massive body shaped like a beer keg, his shiny buzz cut gleaming under the dim light. He was laughing loudly with three of his cronies, a cigar dangling from his lips. He had no idea Kael was approaching, as silent as a ghost. Kael intentionally bumped their table, spilling a glass of red wine across the sticky wooden floor. "Sorry, pal," he said, his voice deep and gravelly, but full of provocation. His eyes locked on Victor. The man looked up sharply, his face flushed with booze, his eyes burning like hellfire. "Are you blind, white boy? You got a death wish coming to the south side?" He stood up, half a head taller than Kael, muscles bulging under a tattered t-shirt. The bar fell dead silent. All eyes turned to them, the music still pounding like a racing heartbeat. Kael smiled coldly, unfazed. "I just want to ask about Dante Reyes. And his son? Rico, where is he?" Victor froze for a second, then let out a thunderous laugh, his yellowed teeth flashing. "What do you know about my boss? You piece of trash?" He charged like a bull, swinging a heavy right hook like a sledgehammer straight at Kael's face. The air vibrated, the wind whistling past his fist. Kael sidestepped to the right, quick as a flash, his body twisting with CIA instinct. He used jiu-jitsu to lock Victor's arm from behind, twisting the elbow back with terrifying force. The crack of bone echoed over the music. Victor roared in pain, his face contorted. His three cronies jumped in, one wielding a broken beer bottle with jagged edges, another pulling a crescent-bladed dagger, the third raising a pair of brass knuckles. The bar erupted into chaos as patrons screamed and scattered, tables and chairs crashing and clattering. Kael released Victor, spinning into a low Muay Thai kick that swept across the bottle wielder's knee. The man's shin bone shattered and he collapsed to the floor. Whimpering, the knife wielder lunged from the side, steel flashing under the neon lights, aiming for Kael's ribs. He caught the man's wrist with both hands. Using an Aikido pivot to hurl him over his shoulder, the body flew over the bar, smashing into the liquor rack in a shower of glass and red wine that sprayed like blood. Shouts echoed through the thick, suffocating cigarette smoke. The third man rushed in with a flurry of street boxing punches, his fists whistling towards Kael's jaw. He took half a step back, blocked with his forearm, then countered with a sharp Muay Thai elbow to the man's ribs. A dry crack echoed as the man coughed up blood and crumpled, clutching his chest. Victor, having partially recovered, charged at Kael in a blind rage, swinging a devastating uppercut like a scythe. Kael leaned back, feeling the hot wind from the fist graze his cheek, then unleashed a taekwondo roundhouse kick that connected with his temple. Victor's head snapped back, his eyes glazing over, but he still snarled and lunged forward, landing a punch to Kael's chest that sent him staggering back 2 steps. A searing pain spreading like fire. A memory of Alara flashed in his mind. "I love you, Kael. Don't let the darkness consume you." He gritted his teeth, a firestorm of hatred erupting inside him, and countered with a judo straight punch to Victor's jaw, followed by a Muay Thai knee to the gut The air was forced from the man's lungs as he stumbled back into the cracked concrete wall. Cartel lungered, pinning him to the beer and blood-soaked floor. His dagger pressed against his throat, the steel blade biting lightly into his skin. "Talk! Where is Rico Reyes? And why is Dante targeting my family?" Victor gasped for air, his face turning purple, sweat and blood dripping from his brow. "Your Voss? The CIA traitor?" He struggled. But a second punch to his ribs made him scream as the bone fractured further. "Rico. He's at the dockside warehouse, prepping a new gun shipment from Mexico. You son of a bitch. You hit the boss's smuggling line." Hearing Rico's name, the bastard who had held the knife that slit Finn's throat, Cartel froze, his eyes turning bloodshot. He drew a thin line on Victor's cheek, fresh blood welling up. "More details, or I sever your artery." Terror-stricken, Victor spilled everything. A major weapons shipment coming through the port of Chicago next week. Protected by a friend inside the CIA. Cartel tightened his grip on the dagger but stopped. He needed him alive to send a message. A silenced Beretta coughed softly, the bullet piercing Victor's skull, splattering blood across the graffitied wall. His three accomplices tried to hide behind the counter, but Cartel was faster, throwing his dagger and sinking it into the first man's back, the blade burying itself in his spine. The second man took a spinning capoeira kick to the face, his jaw shattering as he collapsed. The last man screamed and tried to raise his gun, but Cartel lunged, locking him in a jiu-jitsu chokehold and snapping his neck in an instant. The bar was now filled with nothing but thick smoke and the stench of death. The floor slick with pooling red blood. Cartel slipped out the back door, melting into the relentless rain, his heart pounding. The intel from Victor was a breakthrough, but he needed backup. Taking on a cartel alone was suicide. He pulled a burner phone from his jacket and dialed a familiar old number. "Brock, I need you," he said, his voice a gravelly rasp. On the other end, Brock Slade's voice came through, as solid as stone. "I'm on my way. Brother, tell me about these bastards from Mexico." Cartel quickly explained about Reyes, about the deaths of Elara and Finn, about his plan for revenge. Brock, a former SEAL who had fought alongside Cartel on the Mexican border, agreed without hesitation. "I'm bringing guns and grenades. Meet me in the loop before dawn." Cartel ended the call, staring out at the dark south side street as the rain washed away all traces. The fire of vengeance still burned, but now it was mixed with suspicion. Who was the friend in the CIA? Would Brock get there before Rico brought his forces? Or was this smuggling operation bigger than he imagined? Touching ghosts from his past, Chicago was swallowing him in darkness. But Cartel was ready to dive into hell. The darkness of Chicago consumed everything. But Cartel Voss wasn't sleeping. He stood by the window of his apartment in the loop, his eyes scanning the rain-slicked street below, waiting for Brock Slade before dawn. The words of Victor Kane still echoed in his mind. A major weapons shipment through the port of Chicago next week, with protection from a friend in the CIA. That whisper was like a sharp blade, awakening the suspicions from his 5 years of wrongful imprisonment. Had his past as an operative been betrayed from within? Cartel tightened his grip on his dagger, the cut from the fight on the south side still oozing slightly on the back of his hand. The fire of vengeance smoldered, now mixed with anxiety. If Reyes knew he was back, this apartment would become a tomb. A soft knock came at the door, the familiar Morse code from their days on the Mexican border. 2 short, 1 long. Cartel opened the door a crack, and Brock Slade stepped in, his massive frame like a stone statue under a rain-soaked coat, a heavy metal case in his hand. "You look like you just crawled out of hell." "Kyle," Brock said, his deep voice cutting through the sound of the rain drumming against the window. Cartel smirked, locking the door. "Hell's about to come knocking." "What'd you bring?" Brock opened the case on the worn wooden table, revealing a deadly arsenal. An M4, a one rifle with a night vision scope, 2 Glock 19 sidearms, a set of serrated combat knives, and a few gleaming M67 grenades. Enough to make these guys from Mexico regret being born. Brock said, his eyes glinting in the dim yellow light. The two had been through hell and back in the border desert, where they destroyed one of Reyes's gun caches and nearly died in a hail of gunfire. Now, in the apartment turned fortress. They made a quick plan. KL spread an old map of Chicago on the floor, his finger pointing to the red-circled loop area. "They'll send scouts before Rico comes. I've set traps. Tripwire at the main door. Smoke grenades under the kitchen floor. And a homemade mine in the backyard packed with scrap metal." Brock nodded, checking the M4 with practiced movements. The click of the magazine echoing in the room. "I'll take the loft. Provide sniper cover from above. You handle close quarters down here. And if we take one alive, we make him talk about the port." Cale gripped his dagger. The memory of Finn laughing in the loft, cutting him like a knife. "We're not letting them take anyone else. Reyes will pay first." Suddenly, a sound came from the dark alley tires crunching on the wet pavement. An engine growling like a predator. Kyle killed the main light, signaling for Brock to hide behind the cracked concrete wall. A black SUV screeched to a halt 50 meters from the building, its headlights sweeping like demonic eyes. 4 men stepped out, dressed in tight black gear, AK-47s at the ready, moving with professional precision as they scanned the area. Reyes's elite scout team, not your average thugs. KL whispered through his teeth, "More than I expected. They want to play? I'll play." He slipped out the back door into the dark hallway, melting into the chilling rain that soaked through his leather jacket. Brock climbed to the loft, taking a sniper position behind a wardrobe, the M4's scope locking onto the first target. KL circled around behind the group, his steps silent in the muddy puddles, his breathing controlled like a meditating warrior. One man was scanning the apartment windows with binoculars, oblivious to KL approaching from the shadows of a bush. He unleashed a low taekwondo kick to the back of the man's neck. The crack of his vertebrae echoed as he pitched forward, face down in the mud, bloody foam bubbling from his mouth before he could even scream. The other two spun around, startled, and sprayed the bushes with their AKs, bullets thudding into the rotten wood of a tree trunk, sending splinters flying. KL rolled out of the way, the rain causing the bullets to skid off target, then shot out like a panther. He used a jiu-jitsu lock from behind on the second man, breaking his wrist with a horrific twist. The snap of bone drowned out the rain as the man screamed in agony. Dropping his rifle, the third man fired repeatedly, a bullet grazing Cale's shoulder and tearing through his leather jacket. Warm blood seeping out. Gritting his teeth, Cale rolled behind a clanging metal dumpster, then threw his dagger. Burying it deep in the man's thigh, the steel blade sank in, and blood sprayed across the wet pavement. As he crumpled, Cale lunged forward and finished him with a Muay Thai punch to the jaw, shattering the bone and knocking him unconscious. A gunshot rang out from the loft, Brock's precise sniper fire. An M4 round pierced the fourth man's chest as he tried to run, his body collapsing onto the sidewalk, his blood mixing with the rain in a dark red stream. The third man, the survivor with the punctured thigh, tried to crawl up, his trembling hand reaching for a pistol on his belt. Kyle pinned him to the drenched ground, driving a Muay Thai knee into the wound, hot blood gushing out. "How many did Reyes send?" he growled, his dagger pressed against the man's throat, the steel blade lightly scoring the skin. The man panicked, his eyes wide with terror in the rain. 10. 10 more. They're coming tonight." Rico's leading them. Port of Chicago, a shipment of AKs from Mexico, protected by a CIA agent, Cale Frozer. A storm of fury, exploding within him, a traitor from the inside. The same one who had framed him 5 years ago? He broke the man's arm with a sharp crack, then whispered, "Tell Reyes I'm waiting." Their bodies were dragged into the bushes, the rain washing away the evidence. Back in the apartment, Cale signaled to Brock with his hands. They're coming in force. Rico's leading, and there's a CIA mole. Brock smirked from the loft. Good. I've added more traps, shotgun rigged to the door. Spring-loaded blades in the hallway ceiling. They worked quickly. Cale checked the graze on his shoulder. The bleeding had stopped. But the throbbing pain was a constant reminder. A memory of Ilara surfaced. Promise me. Cale. Don't let hate consume our son. He shook his head, tightening his grip on his Glock. I won't let them take anyone else. Brock clapped him on the shoulder. We're about to make Mexico City tremble. Headlights flared through the downpour. 3 black SUVs roared up like demons. And 12 assassins poured out under the grey sky, led by Rico Reyes, a tall, imposing figure, his face a roadmap of scars, his dark eyes filled with hatred. They fanned out, advancing on the backyard like a pack of wolves. One stepped on the homemade mine. The explosion tore the night apart, sending a spray of flesh and shrapnel into the air. Splattering the brick wall with blood, the others panicked, taking cover behind their vehicles and firing blindly. Bullets shattering the windows. Cale triggered the smoke grenades remotely, and a thick white fog enveloped the area like a hellish mist. He burst out the back door, his knife flashing in the streetlights, and delivered a taekwondo kick to the chest of the first man who broke through the smoke. He flew backward into a wall, his ribs shattering. Before he could recover, Cale sliced his throat cleanly, blood erupting in a crimson fountain that mixed with the rain. Hearing the noise, the 2 men raised their AKs and fired wildly into the thick smoke. Bullets clanging off the concrete walls. Cale rolled behind an old truck crate, throwing a dagger that struck the second man in the forehead. The steel blade pierced his brain, and he collapsed. Eyes rolled back white. The other one panicked and fired blindly. But Cale circled behind him, firing 2 shots from his silenced Glock into his knee and then his neck. The body crumpled, blood pooling on the slick concrete floor. Inside the apartment, Rico led 6 men, blowing the main door open with a grenade. The explosion shook the building, blasting the door off its hinges. An iron weight, tethered by a cable, dropped from the ceiling, crushing one man's leg. He screamed in agony as his bones shattered. They charged with guns raised into the smoke. But from the mezzanine, Brock sniped like the Grim Reaper, his M4 roaring as he dropped 3 of them in a heartbeat. Their heads exploded, spraying blood and brain matter across the stained ceiling. Cale charged in from the dark hallway, unleashing a rapid Muay Thai combo, a jab to the first man's jaw, the sound of bone cracking, a knee to the second man's head, sending him crumpling with a groan, an elbow to the third man's throat, crushing his windpipe and making him choke on his own blood as he fell. Rico roared from the shadows, "Find him! Kill them all!" He fired his MP5 in a long burst, a bullet grazing Cale's arm, tearing through flesh and drawing hot blood. A sharp pain shot through him, but Cale gritted his teeth, rolling for cover behind a shattered kitchen cabinet and tossing a flashbang. The brilliant white light temporarily blinded the assassins. Cale burst out, using jiu-jitsu to lock one man's arm and snap his neck with a sharp crack. Another swung a dagger from the side. Cale dodged just in time, delivering a sweeping capoeira kick to his face. His jaw shattered, and he slammed his head against the wall, knocked unconscious. Only Rico was left. He drew a pistol and fired with precision, but Cale dodged, Lunging forward with a roundhouse kick to the chest, Rico crashed through the glass window, landing alive in the back alley. The sound of his shoulder bone cracking. Kael jumped after him, pinning Rico to the soaking wet ground, a knife to his throat. "Who's your father's guy at the CIA?" Rico smirked through a bloody mouth. "You don't know anything." "The mole is Nadia Thorne. She's the one who framed you 5 years ago." Nadia's name, his former colleague, hit Kael like a thunderbolt. He slammed his fist into Rico's face again and again, each punch carrying 5 years of pain, but then stopped, tying him up with steel wire. The sound of distant police sirens echoed. Brock yelled down from above, "You're hit!" Kael wiped the blood from his arm. "Not dead yet. We're heading to dockside now." But was Nadia a bigger trap? The Chicago rain kept falling, heralding a coming storm of betrayal. The Chicago rain continued its steady rhythm, washing away the blood on the floor of the Loop apartment. But Kael Voss didn't stop. He wiped the wound on his arm with a piece of cloth torn from Rico Reyes's shirt. The bleeding stopped, but the throbbing pain was a constant reminder of the betrayal. The name Nadia Thorne, a former CIA colleague, someone who had fought alongside him on the Mexican border, now emerged like a ghost from his past. 5 years ago, she was the one who framed him as a traitor, sending him to prison to cover up Dante Reyes's smuggling ring. "Nadia," Kael muttered, his voice raw with fury, his grey-blue eyes flashing under the neon light filtering through the blinds. The intel from Rico confirmed it. She was the friend, providing protection. Selling him out for the cartel's money. Brock Slade limped down from the mezzanine, an old injury acting up. His M4 still at the ready. Dockside could be a trap set by that bitch. "I'm coming with you to hunt Nadia first." Kael nodded, tightening his grip on his dagger. "Midtown, the CIA safe house. I need her alive to talk about Reyes's stronghold in Mexico." The two of them left the apartment through the back door, melting into the city's midnight shadows. Kael drove an old truck borrowed from Brock, speeding down the slick streets of Michigan Avenue, the headlights cutting through a misty rain that felt like blood. Midtown was bustling despite the late hour. Neon lights from bars, reflecting on the wet pavement. The sound of car horns mixing with the patter of the rain. The clandestine CIA office was in a dark glass skyscraper. Its basement, the very place where Nadia had once worked with Kael, planning cartel assassinations. He parked 100 meters away, watching through the rearview mirror. Nadia emerged from a side door, dressed in a tight black pantsuit, her blonde hair in a high bun, carrying a black leather briefcase, clearly leaving in a hurry. Her eyes scanning around nervously. "She knows we're coming," Kael whispered, his heart pounding like a war drum. Brock nodded from the passenger seat, checking his Glock. "I'll provide cover from a distance with the M4. Go. End this she-devil." Kael darted from the truck like a phantom, blending into the soaked crowd under a sea of colorful umbrellas, his feet moving swiftly on the slick sidewalk. Nadia looked back, her eyes narrowing as she recognized him through the rain, then turned and bolted into a narrow, dark alley behind the building. Kael accelerated, his leather shoes splashing through puddles, his breathing steady even as his heart boiled with rage. "Stop. Nadia, you owe me 5 years, he yelled over the rain, his voice echoing like thunder. She didn't look back, drawing a Sig Sauer pistol from her waistband and firing behind her without aiming. The bullet zipped past Kael's ear, the deafening crack lost in the distant sound of horns, leaving a searing burn on his skin. Kael rolled behind a dented metal trash bin, returning fire with 2 shots from his Beretta. The bullet slammed into the stained red brick wall as Nadia expertly dodged around a corner, disappearing into a bustling night market. Red lanterns hung from street food stalls, the spicy smell of tacos mixing with exhaust fumes and the damp air. Kale gave chase, pushing through a crowd of tourists, knocking over a basket of oranges that rolled across the ground. Nadia suddenly spun around in the narrow walkway, throwing an unexpected punch from her empty hand. A professional boxer's jab aimed straight for Kale's jaw, the wind whistling through the humid air. He instinctively leaned left. A jiu-jitsu move, blocking with his forearm and feeling the impact shudder through his bones. He countered with an arm lock from behind, twisting her elbow with sharp force. The bone groaned, and Nadia screamed in pain but didn't submit, kicking low at Kale's knee and causing him to stumble back, a sharp pain shooting up his thigh. "You betrayed me for Reyes's money?" Kale growled. Lunging forward with a Muay Thai straight punch to her stomach, the air rushed out of her, and Nadia stumbled back, crashing into a wooden stall. Sending fruit flying, she gave a vicious smirk through the pain, blood trickling from the corner of her mouth, and drew a crescent-bladed dagger from her tall boot, lunging with lightning speed at Kale's ribs. The steel blade flashed under the bright red lanterns, cutting through the damp air. Kale dodged by a hair's breadth, feeling the cold wind of the blade slice past his leather jacket, then delivered a low Muay Thai sweep kick to Nadia's knee. Her shin bone cracked, but she still charged forward with a series of street-fighting moves, landing a hook to Kale's chest that made him stagger back, the old wound on his arm reopening with a warm trickle of blood. A memory flooded back. In Mexico City, Nadia had saved him from a cartel ambush, laughing by a campfire. "We're family. Kyle." Now, it was all just a deceptive mask. He gritted his teeth and countered with a straight judo punch to her jaw, followed by a taekwondo roundhouse kick to her temple. Nadia's head snapped back, her eyes blurring, but she rolled and fired her gun 3 times, the bullets clanging off a nearby truck as the market crowd screamed and scattered. Kale vaulted onto the hood of the low truck, using the momentum to launch himself down onto Nadia, cinching a jiu-jitsu chokehold from behind. Her windpipe was crushed, her face turning purple as she gasped for air. "Talk. Where's the Reyes stronghold, and what's the plan with the US officials?" Nadia struggled, her nails scratching bloody lines on Kale's neck, and whispered through clenched teeth, "Mexico City, Polanco district. But you'll be dead long before you ever touch Dante." She bit down hard. Activating a device in her briefcase, a distress signal flashed, and the roar of engines echoed from the end of the alley. 2 black cars sped toward them like demons. 4 of Reyes's assassins poured out, AK rifles ready in the drizzle, their eyes scanning like wolves. Kyle pulled Nadia up as a human shield, firing back with his Beretta. 2 shots hit the first man in the chest, and he collapsed, his blood staining the wet street red. The others unleashed a hail of gunfire, bullets whizzing past, slamming into brick and metal. Kale rolled behind a metal cargo container, dragging Nadia with him, a bullet tearing through his bicep, drawing fresh blood. Outnumbered, Kale was pinned in a dark corner of the alley. Nadia chuckled, trying to struggle free. "You're finished. Voss. Reyes has friends in Washington." But then, the crack of a sniper rifle echoed from a nearby rooftop. Brock Slade appeared like the Grim Reaper, his M4 firing in rapid succession, taking down 2 men in an instant, their heads exploding in a spray of brain matter in the rain. "Sorry, I'm late," Brock yelled, sliding down from the roof on a makeshift rope and joining the fray with a Muay Thai punch to the 3rd man's face, shattering his jawbone. Kale seized the opportunity, binding Nadia's hands with a steel wire from his pocket, cuffing her wrists tightly. "Thanks." Brock. The last man lunged with a dagger. Kale dodged the stab and delivered a sweeping capoeira kick to his throat with a crushed windpipe. He choked on his own blood and collapsed. They dragged Nadia into an abandoned warehouse near the market. Under the dim, Yellow glow of a street lamp. Rain pattered on the leaky tin roof. Kale pressed a knife to her throat, the cold steel touching her skin. The data on Mexico, all of it. Nadia, her face bruised and bloody, gasped for breath. In the briefcase, a map of the Polanco stronghold, a list of weapons shipments through the port of Chicago. Kael opened the case. Retrieving a USB drive and soaking wet documents, the intel was detailed. Dante Reyes was hiding in a luxury villa in Polanco with an elite force. But deeper still, a U.S. Department of Justice official was providing cover in exchange for black weapons for clandestine operations. Kael clenched his fist. The memory of his son Finn crying, "Daddy," flooding back. His rage spreading like wildfire. "You're going to die slowly for Alara and Finn." He snarled. But Brock stopped him. "Leave her for the CIA. We need to be alive to hunt Reyes." The sound of police sirens grew closer, red and blue lights flashing in the distance. Kael and Brock knocked Nadia unconscious with a blow to the temple and vanished into the rainy darkness. On the drive back to the loop, Kael checked the USB on his phone. A major shipment was coming, tied to a plot to create chaos at the border. "We have to go to Mexico," Kael said, his voice as hard as steel. Brock nodded. "But first, we handle the port." A mole like Nadia is just the tip of the iceberg. The city of Chicago bustled on under the rain, but inside Kael, a storm of vengeance was brewing. Was Polanco the final trap, or did the betrayal from Washington run deeper than he could ever imagine? The city of Chicago hummed on under a persistent drizzle, but Kael Voss had already left it behind. On a night flight to Mexico City, he sat motionless in the last row of the cabin, staring out the window at the ghostly white clouds under a crescent moon. The USB drive from Nadia Thorne, a heavy weight in the pocket of his worn leather jacket. The data revealed Dante Reyes's lair in the luxurious Polanco district, the command center for his cross-border smuggling ring of AKs and grenades, operating under the protection of Washington officials. Kael clenched his fist, the wound in his arm still throbbing from the Midtown chase, dried blood crusting under a makeshift bandage. Handle the port first, he had told Brock Slade before they parted ways at O'Hare. Brock stayed behind to watch the weapons shipment, while Kael went alone to Mexico, where it all began with the deaths of Alara and Finn, and where it would end in blood. But was he walking into a trap? Or would his brand of vigilante justice turn the tables, saving thousands of lives from a hellfire of guns? Kael landed at Benito Juarez Airport at dawn, the sweltering Mexico City air hitting him like a challenge, a mix of exhaust fumes and fried cornmeal from street carts. He rented a beat-up, ash-grey Ford Taurus, and drove through the crowded streets of Reforma, the blare of horns drowning out his own racing heartbeat. His target, La Sombra Roja, an underground bar in the central Zocalo district, a cartel den where information flowed like cheap tequila. According to the USB data, Leora Kane, Reyes's sister, a 28-year-old lawyer at a high-end firm who was growing suspicious of her brother, often came here to unwind. She could be his key, his inside source. If Kael could persuade her, he posed as a disgraced American businessman, wearing a wrinkled grey suit, his hair neatly combed to hide the scar on his forehead, a dagger concealed in his polished leather boot. He entered the bar in the late afternoon. Dim red lights illuminated a tattooed crowd. Loud mariachi music blared from old speakers, and the air was heavy with the smell of cigars and sweat. Leora sat alone at the dark wood bar, her long black hair falling over one side of her sharp face, her brown eyes showing a flicker of exhaustion beneath a thin layer of makeup. She wore a tight black dress, a third margarita in front of her, her hand clutching her phone as if waiting for a message from hell. Kael approached, ordered a tequila, reposado, and deliberately brushed his elbow against hers as he reached for the salt. "Pardon me. Señorita, you look like you're waiting for a storm." he said in fluent Spanish, his deep voice hiding the readiness of a blade. Leora turned, her eyes narrowing with suspicion, but not hostility. A forced smile on her lips. Maybe just waiting for trouble. Who are you? Gringo? You're not the usual tourist. Cale sat on the stool beside her, his eyes locking onto hers. Just an American looking for an opportunity. For business. I hear Dante Reyes has a lot of influence here. Your brother. Isn't he? Leora tensed for a moment, her hand gripping the glass so tightly it creaked. But she quickly masked it with a burning sip of tequila. My brother? What do you know about him? She whispered, her eyes scanning the bar like a she-wolf, protecting her den. They spoke carefully. Cale hinting at a partnership opportunity with the cartel, revealing just enough information from the USB to test her. Leora slowly opened up. She suspected her brother was smuggling guns, and that her mother had committed suicide because she couldn't bear the family's violence. I don't want to be involved anymore, she whispered, her eyes turning red under the glaring neon light. Dante. He changed after he took over. Those shipments from the border. They aren't just drugs. Cale sensed his chance she could be his informant, providing the codes to the Polanco villa. But suddenly, a large man rushed from a corner of the bar, recognizing Cale from a photo Reyes had sent out. You're Voss! The boss wants your head on a platter! The man pulled a curved dagger and lunged, aiming for Cale's chest with brutal force. The air whistling in the suffocating room, the bar erupted into chaos. Screams drowned out the mariachi music as patrons scrambled for cover. Knocking over tables and chairs with a crash, Cale instinctively dodged to the right with a jiu-jitsu maneuver, the blade slicing through his suit jacket, then lunged forward, locking the man's arm from behind and twisting his elbow with a horrific snap. The sound of bone cracking echoed through the bar, and the man screamed in agony. Dropping the knife, 3 of his cronies jumped in. One wielded a broken tequila bottle with a jagged edge. Another pulled a Beretta pistol, and the third brandished a pair of dragon-tattooed brass knuckles. Cale released the first man and threw a low Muay Thai kick, sweeping the knees of the man with the bottle. His shin bone shattered, and he collapsed onto the liquor-soaked wooden floor. The gunman fired 2 silenced shots, the bullets burying themselves in the rotten wood of the bar, sending splinters flying. Cale rolled behind an overturned table, vaulted onto the counter, and delivered a spinning taekwondo kick to the man's jaw. It dislocated with a pop. The gun clattered to the floor, and Cale dove down, swiftly slitting the man's throat with his own dagger. A torrent of dark red blood poured out, staining the floor like a river from hell. Leora screamed in terror but didn't run. She pulled a small pistol from her purse and shot the third man in the shoulder as he tried to ambush Cale from behind, the bullet tearing through flesh and drawing hot blood. Who are you? Really? She demanded, her voice a mixture of trembling and outrage. Cale pulled her down behind the wrecked bar. I'm the one hunting Reyes. For my family, and you can help me stop him. The remaining henchmen poured in from the back door, 5 more men with daggers and iron bars, their eyes bloodshot in the thick, hazy smoke. Cale launched himself at them like a predator, unleashing a rapid series of taekwondo attacks. He kicked the first man in the chest, sending him flying into a wooden table that splintered on impact. The second swung an iron bar at his head. Cale dodged just inches away, used jiu-jitsu to throw him to the floor, then delivered a series of Muay Thai punches to his face, sending a spray of blood and tequila across the room. But another man stabbed him from the side, the steel blade grazing his back, tearing his skin and leaving a trail of warm blood, the pain spreading like fire. He spun around, slamming a judo elbow strike into the man's nose, shattering the bone and sending blood everywhere. The last man charged with a long knife. Cale caught his wrist, twisted it back. and plunged the blade into the man's own thigh. The man crumpled. Screaming, Cale pinned him down. "Where is Reyes? What's the shipment?" the man gasped. His face contorted in pain. "Polanco. The villa. A big gun shipment is heading to Chicago next week. For American extremists." Cale knocked him unconscious with a capoeira kick to the temple. Then turned to Leora, who was trembling but resolute. "I know my brother is a monster. Here. This USB. It has the codes to the villa and the shipping manifest." Cale took it and quickly scanned the contents. Details of weapons moving from Mexico to the US. Implicating government officials. "Why are you helping me?" he asked. His gut tight with suspicion, the memory of Nadia's betrayal still haunted him. Leora looked down, her voice breaking. "For my mother, and for justice. Before it's too late." Cale nodded. But his heart was heavy. Was this about avenging Ilara and Finn? Or stopping a plot that could kill thousands? The internal conflict cut like a knife, the line between personal vengeance and his mission blurring. He pulled her out the back door, and they disappeared into the bustling Zocalo crowds. The distant wail of police sirens echoing behind them. On the way back to his shabby hotel, Cale wondered, was Leora truly loyal, or was this another of Reyes's elaborate traps? Mexico City swallowed its secrets under the sweltering sun, and Cale was ready to dive deeper into that hellish desert. Cale Voss sped out of the Mexico City shadows, his heart pounding after the knife fight at the Zocalo bar. The USB from Leora Kane felt heavy in the pocket of his leather jacket, containing the codes to the Polanco villa and the manifest for a gun shipment from Mexico to Chicago. He drove the old Ford back to his rundown hotel on the outskirts, mulling over her words for justice. Before it's too late. Could he trust Leora, with her determined facade? Or was it another sophisticated trap like the one Nadia Thorne had set, designed to push him deeper into Dante Reyes's hell? Cale called Brock Slade on a secure, encrypted phone. "I've got intel. A big shipment is hitting the Chicago port next week. I'm coming back now." Brock's deep voice came through the line, muffled by the sound of Chicago rain. "I'm watching the port. They're on the move." "Cale, Reyes's crew is moving into the loop. Rico's leading them." Cale hung up, a knot of anxiety tightening in his stomach. Avenging Ilara and Finn was now intertwined with a much larger mission, stopping those weapons from falling into the hands of American extremists. But the line between personal hatred and justice was blurring under the oppressive Mexican sun. Cale landed at a gray, drizzly O'Hare at dawn, the biting Chicago cold cutting through his leather jacket like a sharp reminder. He drove an old truck back to the Loop apartment, where Brock was waiting with an M4 at the ready. The apartment was still a fortress. Tripwires lined the hallway. Smoke grenades were buried in the floorboards, and homemade mines were planted in the backyard. Brock clapped him on the shoulder, his eyes glinting in the pale yellow light. "You look like you've been through the desert." "What'd you get from Mexico?" Cale handed him the USB, Polanco codes, and a list of guns. "Reyes is selling to American terrorists to stir up chaos at the border. They planned quickly, surveil the port first." But suddenly, a noise rose from the street below. 3 black vans screeched to a halt like demons, carrying a cartel kill squad of 18 assassins, led by a hate-filled, scarred Rico Reyes, an MP5 gripped in his hands. "They knew I was back," Cale growled, drawing his Beretta. Brock grabbed his rifle. "Let's get started. We'll turn this place into a graveyard." But before they could move, the squad had swarmed the building's courtyard, AK rounds shattering the windows in a shower of metallic rain. Cale triggered the front yard mine. The explosion ripped through the night, blasting 2 men into a gory mess of flesh and shrapnel, their blood splattering across the wet pavement. The others scrambled for cover behind the vans. firing blindly into the thick smoke. Kael charged down the back stairs to the first floor. A Glock in his left hand, a dagger in his right, his heart hammering like a war drum. Rico roared from outside. "Find Voss! The boss wants him alive for torture." The main door was blown open by a grenade, the blast shaking the concrete walls and cracking them. An iron weight from a ceiling trap fell on a cable, crushing one man's leg. He shrieked as bone ground against bone and blood sprayed. They stormed into the smoke left by a flashbang Kael had triggered. But from the mezzanine, Brock opened fire like the Grim Reaper, his M4 barking, taking down 4 men in an instant. Heads exploded, brains splattering across the stained ceiling. Kael burst from the dark hallway into the chaos, slamming a taekwondo kick into the chest of the first man through the breach. The man flew backward, smashing against a brick wall with the sickening crack of breaking ribs. Before he could recover, Kael slit his throat with the dagger, blood gushing like a crimson fountain across the slick wooden floor. Hearing the noise, 3 men unleashed a volley of AK fire into the darkness, bullets chewing into the wall and sending white plaster dust everywhere. Kael rolled behind a wrecked kitchen counter, tossed a flashbang that erupted in a blinding white light, temporarily blinding them, then lunged out. He used jiu-jitsu to lock up the second man's arm, snapping his neck with a single, dry crack. The third man swung a dagger from his hip, the steel glinting in the streetlights that pierced the shattered windows. Kael dodged so closely he could feel the cold wind of the blade on his skin, then drove a Muay Thai punch straight into the man's jaw. Bone shattered. The man choked on blood and collapsed. And Kael finished him with a roundhouse kick to the temple. Blood pooled on the slippery floor, the acrid smell of gunpowder mixing with the stench of burning smoke. But there were too many of them. The remaining 6 of Rico's men stormed the living room, firing their MP5S relentlessly. A bullet grazed Kael's back, tearing through his leather jacket and drawing warm, fresh blood. A sharp pain flared like fire over his old wound, and he gritted his teeth, rolling for cover behind an overturned sofa. He threw an M67 grenade. The explosion shook the room, and metal shrapnel flew, embedding in the chests of 2 men who screamed as their charred bodies collapsed. Taking advantage of the smoke, Rico charged in with a flurry of street boxing punches, his fists whistling through the air, aimed at Kael's chest. He blocked with a judo forearm, feeling the bone-rattling impact, then countered with a Muay Thai elbow to Rico's nose. Blood sprayed from the shattered bridge as he staggered back. Snarling, "You killed my wife and son!" Kael screamed, lunging forward with a low taekwondo kick that swept across Rico's knee. Rico buckled, but swung a long knife from his belt. In an upward slash, the steel blade sliced deep into Kael's thigh, tearing flesh and spilling blood across the floor. Suddenly, gunfire erupted from the back door. Leora Kane appeared like a phantom from Mexico, dressed in tight black gear, a Sig Sauer pistol in her hand. She fired, hitting the shoulder of an assassin sneaking up behind Kael. "I've been following you since the airport," she yelled over the blasts, diving for cover behind a wall and taking down 2 more men, the bullets punching through their chests and splattering the wall red. "What the hell are you doing here?" Kael growled, pulling her behind a broken dining table, his heart pounding with a mix of adrenaline and suspicion. Leora's answer was short, her eyes steady in the smoke-filled air. "To prove my loyalty, my brother has to be stopped." She fired with precision, dropping a third man who was aiming at Brock from the mezzanine. Brock yelled from above, "There are too many!" "Grenade!" An M67 from Brock's hand exploded in the corner of the room, shrapnel tearing into the legs of 3 men, who fell screaming in a bloody heap. Kael took advantage of the chaos, launching into a relentless capoeira sequence. A spinning crescent kick connected with the nearest man's face, shattering his jaw and sending him flying through a glass window to the yard below. He drove his knife into the second man's chest, the steel blade piercing his heart as hot blood spurted out. Rico had retreated into a dark hallway, his shoulder bleeding, but he was still growling as he pulled out a pistol and fired repeatedly. A bullet tore into Cale's shoulder, a deep, agonizing pain that felt like it was ripping his soul apart as blood soaked his shirt. Gritting his teeth, fueled by hatred, Cale chased him down the narrow hall, the memory of Finn crying, "Daddy, save me," flooding back like a consuming fire. "You're going to die for them," he roared, lunging like a wild animal. Rico spun, thrusting with his long knife. Cale dodged, using jiu-jitsu to slam him onto the cold concrete floor. They rolled, trading savage blows. Rico punched Cale's wounded shoulder, sending a spray of blood and a blinding flash of pain through him. Cale retaliated with a judo elbow to the jaw, the bone cracking audibly. Leora rushed in to help, shooting Rico in the thigh and making him roar in pain and collapse. Cale pinned him down, knife to his throat. "Tell me everything," Rico gasped, his face a bruised and bloody mess. "My father, he's selling guns to American extremists and officials in Washington. The shipment at the port of Chicago, it's meant to start a border war, to control the drug trade." The confession hit like a bomb, an international conspiracy bigger than he had imagined. With betrayal running deep in Washington, Cale tightened his grip on the knife but stopped, binding Rico with steel wire instead. "You're going to live to see Reyes fall." The remaining henchmen retreated as the wail of police sirens grew louder, their red and blue lights flashing in the distance. Cale slumped to the blood-soaked floor, gasping for breath, the wounds in his shoulder and thigh burning like hell. Brock limped down from the mezzanine. "You okay?" Cale gave a weak nod, looking at Leora. "Thanks. But if you—" She shook her head. "I choose justice." The information from Rico confirmed the USB drive, a global arms plot, with thousands of lives hanging in the balance. A wave of inner turmoil washed over him. His quest for revenge was now a mission to save the border. Cale stood up, wiping the blood from his face. "First, the port of Chicago. Then we go back to Mexico." But was Leora hiding something? Or had Reyes already planned his next move? Chicago was drowning in a grey dawn, and the storm was far from over. The city of Chicago was drowning in a grim, grey dawn. But Cale Voss found no rest. The wounds on his shoulder and thigh still seeped blood from the fight in the Loop apartment. The throbbing pain, a curse-like reminder of Ilara and Finn's sacrifice, now intertwined with the larger mission revealed by Rico Reyes' confession. The intel from the USB and Rico confirmed it. A massive weapons shipment from Mexico was about to dock, containing not just AK rifles but also grenades and handheld missiles, destined for American extremists under the protection of Washington officials, a conspiracy that reached into the very heart of the government. Cale wiped blood from the floor with an old towel, watching Brock Slade bandage his leg. "The port comes first. We stop the shipment. Then we hunt Reyes." Leora Kane stood nearby, her eyes determined, but her hands trembling slightly. "I know the container codes. Let's finish my brother." But deep inside Cale, suspicion still lingered. Had she truly chosen his side? Or was this just another of Dante's ploys? A fresh rain began to fall, turning Chicago into a slick, muddy river, heralding the hell that was about to swallow them at the deep-water port. Cale drove an old truck through the suburban streets in the early morning. The torrential rain lashed against the windshield like a whip, and Lake Michigan, grey and vast, churned under a heavy horizon. The port of Chicago was immense, like the mouth of a demon, with giant containers stacked impossibly high. The heavy scent of salt and machine oil filled his nose. The roar of cranes drowned out the crashing waves as workers in hard hats moved like ghosts in the downpour. According to the USB data, The shipment was in Zone 7. A green container marked MX-89 packed with guns and grenades from Polanco, disguised as a dock worker in a soaked hard hat. Cale slipped through a chain-link fence under the cover of the rain. His heart hammered against his ribs, recalling his first mission on the Mexican border, the dusty desert rain, the echo of AK-47 fire, and the first time he killed a man, one of Reyes's henchmen. The hot blood that splattered his face had transformed the 25-year-old kid into the CIA's ghost. Now, 5 years later, he was more alone than ever. Suddenly, headlights cut through the darkness between the containers. A team of elite cartel assassins from Mexico emerged, 8 men in soaked black gear, clutching MP5s and daggers, guarding MX-89 like hounds. They moved with professional precision, their eyes scanning the rain-swept darkness. These weren't common mercenaries, they were trained killers from the Polanco villa. Cale took cover behind a rusted container, drew his silenced Glock, his breathing controlled even as his blood boiled. One of the men approached on patrol, his leather boots splashing through puddles. Cale burst from the shadows, delivering a low Muay Thai kick to the man's knee. Bone cracked, and the man crumpled with a muffled scream. Before the sound could travel, Cale locked him in a jiu-jitsu chokehold from behind and snapped his neck. A dry crack echoed through the rain as the body fell into a spreading pool of red water. The remaining 6 men startled, raising their MP5s and spraying bullets wildly into the darkness. The rounds ricocheted off the metal containers with a sharp clang, sending sparks flying. The rain sent the bullets skidding off course as Cale rolled behind a tall stack of crates, firing 2 precise shots from his Glock into the second man's chest. Blood sprayed, mixing with the rain to stain the muddy ground. A deep red, the third man charged with a dagger, the steel blade glinting under the pale yellow crane lights. Aiming for Cale's ribs, he sidestepped, feeling the cold wind of the blade on his skin, and threw a straight judo punch to the man's jaw. Bone shattered. The man choked on blood and collapsed, and Cale finished him with a knife to the chest, the hot steel piercing his heart. But there were too many of them. 5 men were now surrounding him from 3 sides. One threw a grenade. Cale dove away from the deafening explosion as shrapnel whizzed past, a piece tearing into his arm, the warm sting of blood and pain searing his flesh. A memory flooded back, getting badly wounded under a hail of bullets in Afghanistan, surviving only because of his teammates. Now, with Brock and Leora far away, he only had the darkness. Gritting his teeth, Cale charged the nearest man with a flurry of taekwondo kicks, slamming him into a container hard enough to break his ribs. The second man swung an iron pipe from his belt, but Cale ducked under it and used a capoeira crescent kick to his face. His jaw broke, and he tumbled into a puddle, unconscious. But another man ambushed him from behind, punching him in his old shoulder wound. The pain flared like fire, making him stagger. "You die for Mr. Reyes," the man roared, pulling a pistol and firing wildly. Cale rolled behind a container as bullets sparked off the metal, then threw his dagger, hitting the man's hand. The gun fell. Cale lunged, using judo to slam him into the mud, then pummeling him with Muay Thai blows to the chest until bone cracked and blood frothed at his lips. The last man was firing from a distance, but Cale circled behind him and delivered an elbow strike to his throat. His windpipe crushed. He collapsed. Choking, Cale opened the MX-89 container. Inside were wooden crates filled with AK rifles, M68 grenades, and even RPG-7 rocket launchers, gleaming under his flashlight beam. He took pictures and sent them to Brock. His heart heavy, thousands of people were about to die because of this. But a shout blared from the dead man's radio. "Brock Slade's been captured. They ambushed him at dockside." Cale froze. "Brock was taken? Son of a bitch." he snarled, sprinting out of the port into the downpour and speeding toward dockside. The past rushed back. He'd saved Brock in Mexico before, but lost Ilara to the same shadowy forces. He couldn't lose his friend now. When he got to dockside, the warehouse door was wide open. Signs of a struggle everywhere. Shell casings littered the floor, and fresh blood dripped. His phone rang. An unknown number. Rico Reyes's voice. "Voss, you want your friend to live? Come to the abandoned warehouse on the east side. Alone, or I'll slit his throat." Kael raced to the east side through the driving rain. The warehouse was dark, smelling of rust and salt. He stepped inside, Glock ready, and was swallowed by the shadows. Inside, Brock was tied to a steel chair, his face bruised and bloody, surrounded by 6 assassins. Rico stood at their head, his thigh bandaged from their last fight. "So, you came," Rico sneered. His MP5 aimed at Brock's head. "Drop the gun, or he Ds." Kael let the Glock clatter to the floor, but then lunged forward like a panther. One man swung an iron pipe, but Kael dodged and drove a Muay Thai kick into his stomach, making him double over. Choking, a second man thrust with a knife. Kael caught his wrist, twisted it back with a jiu-jitsu lock, and snapped the bone, making the man stab himself in the thigh. Rico fired from a distance, a bullet grazing Kael's leg and drawing blood. He rolled, grabbed the pipe, and swung it into a third man's face, shattering his jaw. The fourth man charged with a long knife. Kael used a taekwondo kick to his wrist, disarming him, and finished him with a straight punch to the chest. Rico roared and charged in, barehanded. The two fought viciously. Rico punched Kael's wounded thigh. The pain searing and blood flowing freely, Kael countered with a judo elbow to his jaw, staggering him. Suddenly, a gunshot from the doorway, Leora Kane appeared, shooting Rico in the shoulder. "I followed you from the port," she yelled, rushing in to help, dropping the last man with a shot to the chest. Kael pulled Brock free, checking him over. "You okay?" Brock managed a weak smirk. "Not dead yet. They spilled it. The American official is the Attorney General. He's protecting Reyes to get those black weapons." Kael's fists clenched, the tragic memories flooding back. Justice now led all the way to Washington. Next stop is Spain. Reyes is hiding in Madrid. But was Leora hiding something? The Chicago rain kept falling, a prelude to the border war about to explode. The Chicago rain kept falling, a steady beat like a funeral drum. But Kael Voss wasn't waiting. The wounds on his shoulder and thigh from saving Brock on the east side seeped blood, a throbbing reminder of the price of loyalty. Now, intel from Rico and Leora Kane was clear. Dante Reyes had fled Mexico City and was holed up in his last bastion in Madrid, Spain, from where he orchestrated a global conspiracy with Washington officials. "We fly now," Kael said to Brock and Leora in the truck as it sped past a grey Lake Michigan, his deep, gravelly voice cutting through the sound of rain lashing against the glass. Brock nodded, bandaging his wound. "I've got Overwatch. She can guide us on the inside." Leora sat in the back, her eyes determined but trembling. "I have the codes to the villa on the outskirts of Madrid. My brother has to be stopped before he starts a war at the border." Kael glanced at her in the rearview mirror, suspicion still simmering. Nadia's betrayal still haunted him. Was Leora just another pawn? The decision to attack Spain was heavy, but the thirst for vengeance for Ilara and Finn spurred him on. Vigilante justice had now become a global fight to the death. They landed at Madrid's Barajas airport at dusk. The humid Mediterranean air, mixed with the smell of olives and exhaust fumes, hit them like a challenge. Kale rented a sleek black SUV and drove through the bustling streets of Gran Via, where the warm yellow lights concealed the cartel's shadows. Reyes's stronghold was on the outskirts of Toledo, a pristine white villa nestled behind high stone walls and infrared cameras, the place where he met with his elite henchmen and secret US officials. Leora led the way, using a code from a USB to open a side gate through the barbed wire fence. They're meeting tonight about the final shipment to the Spain-France border. Kale and Leora slipped into the lush olive grove in the back garden, melting into the shadows under a crescent moon, while Brock stayed outside with an M4, ready to provide sniper cover from a distant hill. Kale moved as silently as a ghost, his leather boots making no sound on the dew-damp grass, skills honed during his years assassinating for the cartel in the Mexican desert, where he had once fought through a hail of bullets just to survive. They approached the frosted glass window of the meeting room, where Reyes was talking to 8 assassins. A map of weapon placements was spread across a glossy walnut table, and Cuban cigars swirled in the air, thick with the smell of Spanish wine. Kyle signaled for Leora to stay hidden behind a bush and slipped in through a back door using a secondary code. Inside, the air was suffocating with the smell of leather and tobacco. He hid behind a crimson curtain, drawing a serrated-edged dagger. A tall guard with a cartel tattoo on his neck was on patrol. Kyle closed in from the shadows and threw a low Muay Thai kick to his knee. The bone cracked softly, and the man buckled. Before he could scream, Kale used jiu-jitsu to lock his neck and twisted sharply. A dry times, snap times echoed in the night wind as the body fell silently into a dark corner. 3 others heard the noise and spun around, raising their Beretta pistols. Kyle lunged, throwing the knife. It struck the first man in the chest, the steel blade piercing his heart and spraying the stone wall with crimson. The second fired a suppressed shot. The bullet grazed Kale's shoulder, tearing his leather jacket and drawing blood. He rolled away, delivering a judo punch straight to the man's jawbone shattered, and he collapsed, coughing up blood. Kale slit his throat to finish him. The noise attracted Reyes, who roared from the meeting room, "Intruder! Kill them all!" The room erupted into chaos as the 6 remaining men charged out with AK rifles, spraying bullets down the marble hallway, sending fragments flying. Kyle activated a smoke grenade from his pouch, and thick white smoke billowed out like a fog from hell. He plunged into the chaos, unleashing a rapid series of taekwondo kicks. He kicked the first man in the chest, sending him crashing through a glass table. The second swung a dagger. Kale dodged, used judo to slam him to the floor, then followed up with a Muay Thai fist to the face, sending a spray of blood into the smoke. But another man fired from a distance, and a bullet sank deep into Kale's thigh. The pain was searing, like a knife slicing through his flesh. Gritting his teeth against the agony, he leaped onto a table and delivered a roundhouse kick to the third man's temple. His head snapped back, and he collapsed. The fourth man rushed him with an iron rod. Kale caught it, twisted it around, and plunged it into the man's stomach, spilling his guts in a bloody mess. Reyes fired his MP5 repeatedly into the thick smoke, the bullets ricocheting off the stone walls. Kale rolled to avoid the shots and rushed him. Unarmed, Reyes landed a heavy punch to Kale's chest, making him stagger back as pain flared from his old wound. Kale countered with a judo elbow to the nose, and blood gushed from the shattered bridge. "You're dead for daring to touch me," Reyes roared, unleashing a low street-style capoeira kick. Kale dodged and used his own capoeira to land a roundhouse kick to Reyes's thigh. Reyes buckled, crying out in pain. But suddenly, Leora burst in through the door, her gun aimed at her brother. "Stop. Dante! It's over!" Reyes froze, his eyes bloodshot. "You treacherous bitch! You sold me out?" Leora trembled. "You've killed too many. For Washington's money." She pulled the trigger, but Reyes dodged with lightning speed and punched her hand. The gun clattered to the floor. He pulled Leora in front of him as a human shield. A wicked grin on his face. "Voss, you've lost." "She was my inside man from the start." Cartel froze, betrayed by Leora. Her eyes were wide with panic. Pleading. But the situation was an elaborate trap. Reyes triggered the alarm. And forces from outside the villa swarmed in. 12 elite assassins from Spain. Rifles at the ready. Bullets whizzing past and embedding themselves in the stone walls. Cartel lunged to save Leora, delivering a Muay Thai kick to Reyes's arm that made him release her. But a bullet grazed his own arm, drawing more blood. He pulled Leora behind the shattered meeting table and returned fire with his Glock, dropping 2 men who fell in pools of their own blood. From outside, Brock provided sniper fire through the window, his M4 taking down 3 men with exploding headshots. But he was pinned down by grenades that shook the olive grove. "Cartel, fall back," Brock yelled over the comms, his voice mixed with gunfire. Cartel threw a flashbang, its blinding light temporarily stunning the assassins. He grabbed Leora and dove through the shattered glass window, rolling onto the wet grass, the glass cutting their skin. The chase began across the villa's sprawling grounds, bullets hounding them like an angry swarm of bees, chipping bark from the olive trees. A man closed in from behind. Cartel spun and delivered a judo punch to his jaw, staggering him, then slit his throat, spilling hot blood. 2 others charged with daggers. Cartel dodged the first thrust and used a taekwondo roundhouse kick to one man's face, then slammed the second to the muddy ground. But they were outnumbered. Another bullet hit Cartel's thigh, this one deeper. Blood poured out, and he nearly collapsed. Survival instincts flooded back. In the Mexican desert, he'd once escaped the cartel by rolling down a sand dune, surviving on stored water and navigating by the stars. Now, he pulled Leora over a low stone wall and dove into the waiting SUV. Brock floored it, speeding down the dirt road as bullets shattered the rear window. They escaped Toledo, racing into the pale Spanish countryside under the moon. The car bucking on the rough asphalt as headlights pursued them from a distance. Reyes's men. Cartel wiped the blood from his thigh, gritting his teeth. "You were playing me from the start," Leora was crying, her voice breaking. "No, he must have figured it out. I just wanted to save you." Cartel tentatively believed her, but his heart was full of doubt. Brock yelled, "They're closing in." Cartel opened the back door and fired a backup M4, taking out a pursuing vehicle in a fiery explosion that lit up the desert. But a bullet hit their tire, and the SUV swerved violently before flipping over. Cartel was thrown onto the dry, hard earth. He pulled Brock and Leora behind a large boulder for cover. The convoy stopped, and 10 men fanned out, hunting them under the howling desert wind. Cartel whispered, "I'll handle this. Stay put." He slipped into the darkness, his survival skills taking over, crawling low to the ground to avoid detection. His breathing slow and meditative. A man approached. Cartel came up from behind with a low Muay Thai kick. As the man buckled, Cartel slit his throat, his blood mixing with the sand. A second man heard the noise and turned. Cartel lunged, using jiu-jitsu to take him to the ground, and rained punches on his face until it was a bloody pulp. The remaining 4 fired blindly. Cartel threw a grenade. The explosion tore through the desert, taking out 2 men in a shower of shrapnel. The last man charged with a long knife. Cartel dodged and drove an elbow into his throat, and he collapsed. The desert fell silent, save for the howling wind. Cartel returned to Brock and Leora. Reyes got away. Leora held up her phone, trembling. "I overheard them. He's running to the Spain-France border to meet the US officials about the global conspiracy." Cartel clenched his fist. "Then we hunt." The pain from his wounds was deep, but the betrayal might run deeper. The Spanish countryside was swallowed by darkness, signaling that the battle at the border had yet to begin. The wound in his thigh and shoulder still seeped blood from the escape at the villa, an ache like hellfire searing his flesh. But Cale gritted his teeth against the pain, his hands gripping the steering wheel until his knuckles turned white. In the passenger seat, Brock Slade took over driving, his face covered in scratches from the grenade blast, his M4 resting on his lap. They're 3 kilometers ahead of us. Reyes is heading for the Pyrenees to meet the US officials and activate the border conspiracy. Leora Kane sat in the back, her hands clutching a Sig Sauer, her eyes red. My father. My brother won't escape. But you have to be careful, he has his last unit. Mercenaries from France. Cale nodded. The memory of Elara and Finn cutting into him like a knife, his wife's warm smile by Lake Michigan, his son's innocent laughter, all of it, stolen by Reyes to hide a buried truth. That truth now felt like a scythe. It wasn't just smuggling. Reyes had framed Cale, branding him a CIA traitor to silence him about a black arms network for Washington. Reyes's convoy appeared ahead, 4 sleek black Mercedes sedans speeding through the arid olive groves, kicking up dust under the cold crescent moon. Cale accelerated, closing in on the last car. Fire! He yelled over the howling wind. Brock opened the window, his M4 roaring. Bullets shattered the enemy's rear windshield and blew out a tire, sending the car flipping and crashing to the ground with a screech of metal. Another car swerved to counterattack, ramming head-on into Cale's SUV. The shriek of metal on metal was as loud as thunder. The vehicle rolled several times through the sand and dust, glass exploding everywhere. Cale was thrown out, his ears ringing from the impact, blood from a cut on his forehead stinging his eyes. Brock and Leora scrambled out and took cover behind the smoldering wreckage as Reyes's convoy rained bullets, kicking up dirt all around them. Reyes's men screeched to a halt, and 15 assassins poured out under the moonlight, armed with AK and MP5 rifles. Leading them was Dante Reyes Tall, his face a roadmap of scars, his black eyes filled with hatred, his white suit stained with desert dust. Kill them all! Reyes's roar echoed across the Pyrenees borderland as he opened fire with his MP5 submachine gun, bullets whizzing past and sending up sprays of sand like a rain of metal. Cale rolled behind a large boulder, pulling Leora down with him, his heart pounding like a war drum. Stay down, he whispered, then launched himself out to counterattack like a desert predator. A man approached from an olive bush. Cale delivered a low taekwondo kick to his knee. The bone snapped, and the man crumpled with a scream. Cale closed in, using jiu-jitsu to lock his arm from behind, and broke his neck with a dry crack. The body dropped, and hot, dark blood stained the red sand. 2 others rushed him with curved daggers. Cale dodged the first thrust and landed a Muay Thai punch straight to the man's jaw, shattering the bone as he coughed up blood. As the second man swung his knife, Cale caught his wrist, twisted it, and plunged the blade into its owner's thigh. The man screamed as blood spurted out. Cale finished him with a judo elbow strike to the throat that crushed his windpipe. From behind his sniper rifle, Brock took down 4 men in the blink of an eye, heads exploding as brains splattered across the sand and dust, but an AK round slammed deep into his chest, and dark red blood erupted from his mouth. Brock collapsed, clutching his chest, his hands trembling. Cale, keep going. I know the truth. Reyes framed you. He killed Elara and Finn to cover it up. American officials want a border war. The words exploded in Cale's mind like a bombshell. The hidden truth. Reyes wasn't just a smuggler. He had orchestrated the massacre of Cale's family to silence them. trading their lives for a weapons contract with Washington's Attorney General to sow chaos between Europe and the Busco. A burning rage erupted inside him. Cale roared and charged into the fight like a savage beast. His eyes blood-red under the moon. "You'll die for them," he screamed. The memory of Elara lying in a pool of blood returning like a fire, searing his heart. Reyes laughed sinisterly, ordering his men to surround Cale. "It's over for you." "Voss!" The remaining 6 men rushed forward, guns blazing across the desert as bullets ricocheted off the rocks. Cale rolled to evade, tossing a smoke grenade. As white smoke and dust filled the air, he lunged at the nearest man, delivering a spinning taekwondo kick that sent his face smashing into the sand. The second man swung an iron pipe, but Cale dodged, using a judo throw to slam him to the ground before delivering a rapid series of Muay Thai blows to his chest, cracking bone and drawing blood. But a third man snuck up from behind, plunging a knife deep into Cale's back. The steel blade tore through his flesh, and searing pain shot through him as blood flowed freely. He spun around, smashing an elbow into the man's nose, shattering it completely. The last man fired from a distance, but Leora rushed out, shooting him in the shoulder. "I won't let you die," she yelled, charging in to help, taking down another man with a fatal shot to the chest. Cale turned to Reyes, his eyes burning with hatred. "You set it all up, the false imprisonment." "My family!" Reyes pulled out a pistol and fired repeatedly. Cale rolled, dodging the bullets as he charged forward, unarmed, across the desert. Reyes punched him hard in his back wound, causing blood to spray as pain flared. Cale retaliated with a Muay Thai kick to the gut that sent him stumbling back, coughing up blood. "What do you know? We control the Spain-France border to funnel weapons to the States," Reyes roared, throwing a low kick. Cale dodged, using a capoeira spin to kick Reyes in the thigh, forcing him to his knees. He pinned him to the dry sand, a knife pressed against his throat. "Tell me everything," Reyes laughed bitterly, blood spilling from his mouth. "I framed you. Killed your wife and son to cover my tracks. Washington wants a war. I'm just a pawn, supplying weapons to extremists to create chaos." The confession cut Cale's heart like a knife. The truth was exposed. This was no longer just about revenge. It was a national conspiracy soaked in blood. But before Cale could act, Brock dragged himself forward, using his last bit of strength to throw a grenade at Reyes's convoy of vehicles. A massive explosion rocked the desert, a fireball engulfing 3 cars and taking out the last of the assassins with flying shrapnel. Brock collapsed onto the sand, his eyes growing dim, blood pooling on his chest. "Finish it, my friend," Cale screamed in anguish. Brock's sacrifice searing his soul. The brother who had saved him in Mexico was now gone. That martyr for justice. Leora cried over his body. He saved us." Cale wiped the blood from his face, his heart heavy with tragic purpose. "I'll end this in Chicago, the abandoned warehouse, where Reyes is hiding the last of the evidence." He left Reyes unconscious and tightly bound. "You'll live to see hell." Leora helped drag Reyes into the one remaining vehicle and drove toward the border. The desert fell silent, the wind howling through the smell of smoke. The price of justice was too high. Did Reyes have one last trick up his sleeve, or would Cale's ghost finally win? The Spain-France border was a blur under the moon, heralding the coming climax in Chicago. The Spain-France border was a blur under the cold, waning moon. But Cale Voss had already crossed it, dragging a tightly bound Dante Reyes in the back seat of an SUV that reeked of burnt rubber. The wounds in his thigh and back, souvenirs from the battle in the Pyrenees desert, throbbed with a pain that served as a grim reminder of Brock Slade's sacrifice, his brother in arms. Gone, with a final crooked smile. "Finish it." Leora Kane drove, her eyes red as she wiped away tears mixed with desert dust. Brock. He was like a father to me. Now we head to Chicago, the abandoned warehouse on the east side, where my brother hid the final evidence on the Washington officials. Kael sat beside the unconscious Reyes, his dagger pressed to the man's throat, his voice a low, tragic rumble. You're going to confess everything before you die. The truth about Ilara, Finn, and the border conspiracy. Reyes's eyes fluttered open, a sinister smile cracking through the dried blood on his face. You think you've won. I have powerful friends in Washington. The Attorney General will save me. The words were like a knife twist, but Kael only tightened his grip. Personal vengeance had now merged with global justice. Bought at the steep price of Brock's blood, they flew to Chicago. Kael's heart heavy. Was this the final trap? Or would his ghost finally swallow hell whole? They reached the east side at midnight. The abandoned warehouse stood isolated in a desolate industrial park, the cold Chicago wind howling through holes in the rusted walls. The smell of salt from Lake Michigan mixed with rust hit his nose like a warning from death itself. Kael dragged Reyes from the car, shoving him into the all-consuming darkness. The flashlight from his phone swept over piles of rotten wooden crates and dusty old machinery. Inside, it was as dark as a tomb, with moonlight piercing through holes in the corrugated roof, casting eerie patches of light on the oil-stained concrete floor. Kael tied Reyes to a broken iron chair and checked his final weapons, a fully loaded Glock 19, a serrated combat knife, and a single M67 grenade. Talk, he growled, pressing the knife to Reyes's throat, the cold steel touching his scarred skin. Reyes sneered, his scarred face illuminated by the moonlight. You think you've won? I've got power in Washington. The weapons are just a small part of it. We want to control the Europe U.S. border, start a war, to profit from black market contracts. The confession was like a scythe. Reyes had framed Kael, murdered Ilara and Finn to silence them, all in exchange for shipping AKs from Mexico for the Attorney General to unleash global chaos. Kael tightened his grip on the knife, the fire of his rage exploding as the memory of Finn crying, "Daddy," returned, tearing his heart to pieces. Leora stood guard outside, her SIG aimed into the darkness. Don't kill him yet. We need the proof the USB drive is in that crate. She pointed to a pile of rotten wood, her voice trembling but firm. Kael nodded, silencing Reyes with a judo chop to the jaw that broke it with a sickening crack and a spray of blood. But suddenly, a sound echoed from the distance. Headlights flared like demonic eyes as 4 black cars sped out of the east side shadows. Reyes's final army, 10 elite assassins from France, armed with AK rifles, grenades hanging from their belts. "It's a trap!" Kael yelled, pulling Leora behind a rusty shipping container. Reyes laughed, struggling partially free of his bonds, pulling a hidden pistol from his jacket and firing wildly at Kael. A bullet whizzed past his ear with a metallic ping. "They came to save me. Voss, my mole in Washington, tipped them off." Bullets ripped through the iron walls. The warehouse shook as the first grenade from an enemy vehicle detonated, sending shrapnel tearing across the blood-stained concrete floor. Kael returned fire with his Glock, hitting the first man to charge in with 2 shots to the chest. He collapsed, his blood painting the rusty wall a dark crimson. Leora fired from behind the container, hitting a second man in the shoulder, who screamed in pain. "I'm going to end you, Dante." But they were outnumbered. 8 men flooded into the warehouse through the smoke and dust from the explosion, spraying a relentless barrage of AK fire that hammered against the container. Kael burst from the shadows, delivering a taekwondo kick to the nearest man's chest, sending him flying into an iron wall with the crack of breaking ribs. Before the man could recover, Cartel slit his throat with his dagger, and blood gushed like a spring, mixing with the red dust on the floor. Two others charged with long, curved knives. Cartel dodged the first thrust, using jujitsu to lock the man's arm, twisting it back until the elbow snapped, then plunged his knife into his gut. The second fired a pistol, but Cartel rolled away, throwing a Muay Thai punch that shattered his jaw, finishing him with a spinning kick to the temple that sent him crashing to the ground. Reyes broke completely free, grabbing an MP5 and firing relentlessly at Cartel from his broken chair, the sound of bullets striking metal echoing through the warehouse like thunder. Cartel dove for cover behind old machinery, a bullet grazing his thigh, reopening the old wound with a burst of hot, searing pain. An internal storm raged within him, the memory of Alara convulsing in a pool of blood, Finn's lifeless, wide-open eyes, Brock falling in the desert, all for this devil and his Washington conspiracy. "You're dead," Cartel roared, charging out like a wild animal and throwing a smoke grenade that filled the area with white haze. He closed in on Reyes, delivering a judo elbow to his nose. Drawing blood, Reyes countered with a punch to Cartel's chest that sent him stumbling back in pain. The two men wrestled on the concrete floor in a brutal, hand-to-hand struggle. Reyes wrapped his hands around Cartel's throat, growling. "You're just a pawn." Cartel broke free, landing a low Muay Thai kick to his gut that made him double over. Coughing up blood, Cartel got to his feet and unleashed a capoeira sequence, a spinning kick to Reyes's face that sent him reeling, followed by a flurry of punches to his chest. Cracking bone, Reyes pulled a dagger and lunged. Cartel sidestepped, grabbing his wrist and twisting it, plunging the blade into Reyes's own shoulder, making him scream in agony. The remaining assassins closed in, firing a volley of bullets through the smoke. One of them snuck up and stabbed Cartel in the side, the blade tearing through his flesh, unleashing a hellish pain. He spun, smashing his elbow into the man's nose, breaking it. Leora charged in, shooting down two more men. Cartel. The evidence. She threw the USB drive from the wooden crate, but Reyes lunged, pulling her into a chokehold and using her as a human shield. A knife pressed to her throat. "Stop. Voss. Or the bitch dies." Cartel froze her. But before Reyes could make a move, police sirens wailed in the distance, their red and blue lights flashing. An unexpected force of justice had arrived. The CIA and Interpol swarmed the warehouse, guns aimed at the assassins. The lead agent yelled, "Thornwood." "Voss, stand down. We have a warrant for Reyes's arrest. The plot was exposed thanks to the USB you sent from Spain." Cartel was stunned. He had sent the data to an old CIA contact before coming to the warehouse. Agents cuffed Reyes, dragging him away as he screamed, "Washington will save me." Leora rushed to her father, crying, "Dante." "Why, Mom?" "Elara." Reyes looked at his daughter, his eyes filled with bitterness. "You betrayed me. But I deserve hell." The arms trafficking conspiracy was completely exposed. The Attorney General was arrested. The Mexico-Spain pipeline collapsed, and thousands of lives were saved. Cartel stood silently amidst the flames spreading from the enemy vehicles to the warehouse, black smoke billowing around him, his heart filled with a tragic sense of victory. Justice had won, but the cost was too high. His family was gone forever, and Brock was never coming back. As the agents cleaned up the scene, Cartel slipped out the back door, melting into the shadows of the rainy Chicago night. Leora ran after him. "Where are you going? We won!" Cartel turned back, his eyes soft for the first time. "My kind of justice isn't over. Leora, new powers will rise from Washington or somewhere else." He vanished into the rain, his tall figure disappearing under the glistening neon lights. A false peace returned to Chicago as cars sped along the wet highways. But a question hung in the air. When would Cale Voss return? Or would he remain a ghost hunting criminals? Forever wandering the shadowy frontiers? The city slept under the rain. But his hell was still burning, waiting for the day it would explode once more.